To be competitive in Forza Horizon 6, you need to deal with building and fine-tuning your cars. So let me guide you through a full tuning process in which I'm going to tell you what all of those settings mean and how I'm setting up my car to tune it to perfection. Today's project car will be the Lamborghini Huracan 4 S1 Class, since it totally hits the sweet spot. It's a great, grippy allrounder which requires a fair amount of changes to unlock its full potential. Simultaneously, many of the general rules I want to share with you in this video also apply here. And before we jump straight into the action, let me also share a few quick facts with you. When you pick your cars, the game shows you these global stats numbers out of 10. Unfortunately, they're completely useless. They won't give you the information you need to make your car competitive. To really check the performance of your car, you have to look out for stuff like power to weight ratio or lateral Gs. And when I talk about PI in this video, I'm meaning the systematic that Forza bases its classes on. Higher PI, aka performance index, means more powerful or quicker cars in theory. And at the end of this video, our lovely Lamborghini will feature a performance index of S1-800. And now let's go. The first thing you do is to check the conversions tab to see if there are any interesting engine or drivetrain swaps or aspirations, because different upgrades here also lead to other upgrade options later. In terms of engine swaps, you definitely need to know that Forza's PI system favors some of the swaps, which means that some are eventually much more valuable than your stock engine or other swaps. Most of that comes from some kind of misinterpretation by the game in terms of the power band. In Forza, the automatic gearbox always shifts before the red line, and this is also where the PI system gets its information from. Hence, it underestimates a few engines and engine parts which get their best power delivery past this red line. Means you and I basically know the game better than Forza itself. In our case of this lovely Lambo, we have a 5.2 liter V10 naturally aspirated stock engine. You have to believe me, since the game doesn't tell you. We can now install 3 different V12s, as you can see, and from these, the racing V12 is generally the best way to go, as it has the best power-weight ratio. And the other 2 you can choose are actually the Aventador and Revuelto engines, and yep, the game doesn't really tell you again. So on paper, the racing V12 would be the way to go in our case. However, our V10 is also really efficient, and the more important reason is it gets the centrifugal supercharger, the best aspiration, which already brings us to the next topic, aspirations. Rule of thumb is that in most cases you want to install these aspirations since they're mostly better than your standard settings. Installing this also means you're going to have 2 more engine options later. I would also like to use this opportunity to share some kind of leaderboard with you in terms of the best aspirations. Number 1 definitely is the already mentioned centrifugal supercharger. Twin and single turbos are a shared second position, which always depends on the case. And on 4th, we've got the supercharger. Now, if we tuned our car for S2 class, then we would go with the already mentioned V12 instead, because it simply gets more power when you're able to install much more engine parts moving further. And by that you can see that the decision regarding engine swaps and aspirations always goes hand in hand. Now we're reaching one of the more controversial topics in the Forza Horizon 6 community, drivetrain swaps. Many people want to keep their cars as purist as possible and see a swap as some kind of blasphemy. In general, we can say that most of the good cars in Forza feature rear-wheel drive or all-wheel drive. Front-wheel drive only works until, let's say, A-Class. Both rear-wheel drive and all-wheel drive have their advantages and problems, but rule of thumb would be that all-wheel drive cars feature better launches, better low-speed acceleration, and will be much easier to control. You can also say that all-wheel drive cars are in general easier to drive and fit well to the game overall with all of its off-road parts. Luckily, our Huracan already features all-wheel drive, and our PI would even increase with a rear-wheel drive swap. This is a no-go, and in 99% of the cases, you don't want to swap an all-wheel drive car in this game. Quick disclaimer, many rear-wheel drive cars can actually be faster when you simply look at the lap times. That's where there are so many rear-wheel drive cars up in the leaderboards. However, they're harder to drive, require good throttle control, and rocking the grass could also lead to some interesting moments if people push you out. Lastly, let's talk about body kits. Forza Horizon 6 has more body kits than ever before, which makes them a crucial part of your tuning journey. They will not only change the looks of your car, but also its behavior. Rule of thumb, if your car features a body kit, it's mostly better to pick it if you're looking for the most competitive build, obviously. It already comes with adjustable aero settings in our case and gives you the opportunity to install wider rear tires than normally, which eventually helps you to get even more grip out of your car. This Liberty Walk body kit even helps us to lose over 100 kg, but not many cars come with such positive surprises, it's more an exception in this case. Now let's head to aero and appearance, which is an easy one for the performance, but sometimes not for your eyes. Since we installed the Liberty Walk body kit, we won't be able to install another front wing, it already comes with the kit as mentioned. What we still need to do though is to get the Liberty Walk rear wing, which even helps us to lose 2 PI. Simultaneously, we're now also able to adjust our rear wing fine-tuning settings. And it actually does not matter which of these rear wings you get. All of them have the same downforce characteristics and adjustable options. You can simply choose the wing you like the most. Generally, it is to say that if you want to make your all-round build competitive, you have to install both front and rear wing. Now let's talk about tires and rims, aka mechanical grip. Obviously, the first thing you want to do is to check your tire compound, and as we can see, there are multiple options. Some are useful, some are definitely not. In general, we can say that for an all-round all-wheel drive car in S1 class, you have to decide between semi-slicks, slicks and rally tires. The stock tires of your Lambo are actually sport tires. Theoretically, slicks have the best grip, of course, but the highest percentage of all-rounders actually use rally tires since, yeah, they have a great cost-value ratio. They still have decent grip, but are very PI effective. As you can see, we're getting 9 points back, and even though the game says minus 0.04 grip, you're actually getting more grip. For that, check the lateral Gs at the bottom, they're actually increasing compared to the sport tire compound. Again, don't believe Forza here. Another little positive side effect is that your grip on grass increases, which definitely comes in handy on a few tracks where you have to cut the grass. In most cases, the rally tires will be the way to go, but there are obviously a few exceptions to this rule, like the Ford GT for example, or the Corvette C8 Stingray, for which you actually use semi-slicks. And if you're going with a pure handling build, it's also becoming more relevant to look out for slicks. And we also just found out that apparently drag tires builds get more relevant when it comes to road racing. But that's something for another day. The front tire width isn't really important most of the time, as it will increase your PI too much by not increasing your grip in the same amount. This is something you basically only install in crazy speed beasts which struggle to hit decent lateral Gs, or if you're going with a full handling build. It's basically only for extreme conditions. But the rear tire width is something you definitely want to include, as it only increases your PI slightly, but definitely improves your traction and rear stability. Easy pick. In our case, due to the wide body kit, we get 375mm rear tires, which you normally wouldn't. Get them. For now, we're leaving tires and rims and are heading to the drivetrain, and the first thing you want to do is to upgrade your differential. You always have to install it because you can now fine-tune your differential settings in the fine-tuning menu, a vital part of your setup. We can decide whether we want to use the race, drift or off-road diff, and interestingly, this always depends on a few factors. Forza is special here. Since our Huracan features its stock drivetrain we had all-wheel drive from the get-go, we could have used all of these, but went with the race differential as it felt the most consistent while testing this car. If we had a rear-wheel drive car which we then equipped with an all-wheel drive swap, you would actually go with the drift differential because of the mostly higher maximum center balance there. For rear-wheel drive cars you're mostly looking for the rally diff, due to the smoother transition from grip to oversteer. And for front-wheel drive cars, however, it's the off-road diff since you get slightly less understeer with it. Yep, it's like science. The clutch is one of these upgrades you rarely install in this game, as cars with modern transmissions already have the fastest shifting times. Simultaneously, if you install race transmissions in this game, they always come with the best clutch already. Hence, the clutch can be something to install in the end, in case you have 1 or 2 more PI to spend to lose a kilogram or 2. But other than that, it can mostly be disregarded. And if you use manual with clutch, you don't need this anyway. In terms of our transmission upgrade, we get the option between our stock transmission, a sport transmission, multiple race transmission and a drift one. Normally it can already be sufficient to only use a sport transmission because you can already change the final drive in your fine-tuning menu. But in our case we went with the race transmission even though it costs us 1 PI here. In a world where we'd need to find 1 more PI in the end, we will probably circle back to a sport transmission though. Eventually this is a matter of build optimization in the end, as always in this game. And in some cars you can actually regain a few PI with certain transmissions, so definitely always keep your eyes open for a few spicy extra PI. We're leaving the drivetrain category for now and head over to platform and handling, where we're starting with springs and dampers. You definitely want to install those to be able to fine-tune stuff like ride height, rebound and bump stiffness, as well as the whole alignment section. The Huracan largely benefits from off-road springs and dampers. They will give you the option to increase your maximum ride height tremendously and make the spring slightly softer than the race version. This will help us to fix some of this crazy Lamborghini stiffness. Furthermore, off-road springs and dampers are slightly more PI efficient. By the way, sport and drift springs are something you never want to install, it's only between race and off-road. Race would be our way to go when the car is less stiff from the get-go, like some grippy handling beasts. The next one is easy, you always want to install both anti-roll bars to be able to fine-tune them in the next section. They also cost almost no PI, get them. Next up, roll cage. It's an upgrade you basically only install on older cars which are in need of some more mechanical grip, which our Lambo certainly isn't. Let's move on. We're finalizing the platform and handling section by losing some weight. Rule of thumb here, always install the race weight reduction when you can, since the lighter is always better. It's one of the most PI efficient upgrades and helps you to accelerate better and improves your handling. One of the easiest picks. Alright, we still have a few PIs to spend to make our car a bit more powerful, since at the moment it would certainly lack speed, but at the same time we don't have that much to spend anymore. But before we check our specific case in terms of engine parts, I'd like to share some general rules with you. The strongest engine updates you can basically get in the game are the exhaust, which always saves you weight, your case-specific aspiration as already mentioned, followed by the fuel system, intake manifold if it's available, or the camshaft depending on the car. Something that should always come last is the intercooler, as it always increases your weight. So only install it when you really need extra power. In a few cars, especially in smaller ones, it even shifts your weight distribution. Another part to check last would be the flywheel, since there are more efficient ways to optimize your build eventually, such as the driveline. All of that means that for the Huracan we're going to start with the race exhaust, which almost gets us to the limit of the class unfortunately. Means we'll only be able to further install 2 smaller upgrades, such as the race intake and the ignition. This will push our car to S1-800 already, but there are still like small adjustments to make for some final touches. We can actually win 1 more kilogram. Yes, we're perfectionists, and for that we're going back to tires, and as you can see we're now at 1198 kilogram. And firstly we installed bigger rear rims. There's no actually benefit in regards to drivability though, we only do it for the stats to get back some spicy PI. Changing the rim style can also do the job sometimes, but not in our case. The last step is now to go back to platform and handling and check the driveline. And voila! By installing the Sport driveline, we're now at 1197 kilogram and still at S1-800. Which means we're now halfway done in our process to tune one of the best Lamborghinis ever. The upgrades are probably the more important part for a tuning setup, however fine-tuning the following settings will definitely give the car its final shape to become pretty competitive. In the Tires tab, you're able to change the settings of your front and rear tire pressure. Different tire compounds favor different tire pressures in this game. Generally you want the tire pressure lower on the axis, which takes most of the load. With rally tires you can go pretty soft compared to some other compounds. However, you also don't want to go too soft to prevent the tires from becoming too hot and behaving like you're driving a sponge. At the same time, you don't want to go too high. Therefore, with rally tires you should always be around 1.5 to 1.8 bar, respectively 21 to 26 psi. How did we find out? Trial and error. Everything is based on experience, and it also differs from car to car and is related to the car's weight. Lighter cars can go with less pressure, whereas heavier cars require more pressure. And all the other perfect tire pressures can be seen now. Feel free to copy. For the Huracan we used 1.8 for both. However, the values differ slightly, as you can see. It will be 1.8 flat for the front tires and 9 clicks to the right from that for the rear. Let's remind ourselves, in our upgrade section we installed the race transmission, which is the reason why we can now tweak the final drive as well as every single gear. In most cases taking care of the final drive is enough, but we obviously want to do it right here. If you lower this final drive value, you increase the length of your gears. You get a higher top speed theoretically, but your acceleration will become slower and vice versa. You want to make your gearbox as short as possible and as long as needed for such an all-round car we're creating. And on the left you can always check what kind of effect your change will have to your acceleration and top speed. About the Huracan, we have to know that its engine produces the most power near the rev limiter, around 8.5k to 9k RPM. That's why it's super important to never shift too early and tune the gears accordingly, so that you can always use your power completely, especially when accelerating out of turns. For some more acceleration, we'll eventually make the final drive slightly shorter, but the stock setting wasn't too far away. At the same time, we'll also make some minimal changes to the rest of the gears, predominantly making the first gear longer to not hit the rev limiter right after the start. But honestly, all of these changes are not that substantial, as you can see, and yeah, don't fix something which isn't broken. I'd also like to stress the fact that these settings aren't working in a vacuum. They always need to be aligned with your aero settings, which we will check in a few moments. But first we're heading to the lovely alignment section. Camber is there to ensure you have the best possible surface contact in corners. In general, you want the front camber value to be a bit higher than the rear camber one, since it's the axis you steer with. Reducing the front camber leads to a slower turn-in reaction, and reducing the rear camber increases traction out of slow corners, but can also lead to instability in faster, longer turns. And as a side note, the rear camber can also be a pretty important tool to cope with some understeer. In this case, you could even check to make the rear camber slightly higher than the front camber. But generally you always want to stay between -1 and 0. In the case of the Huracan, we're going with -0.5 and -0.3, as these settings are a good middle ground for an all-round setup. The toe settings are actually something you want to check at the very end, when you're done with most of your tweaks and if you're not able to address some interesting driving characteristics. It's basically a last resort. If in the end your car is still understeering, you might want to increase your front toe by 0.1 or 0.2, not more. And if you decrease the rear toe, the rear end stability of your car will be increased. The higher the front caster value, the quicker the car straightens out after steering and the more straight line stability you get. In Forza you're mostly using higher values for this setting, which makes tap steering much easier. The positive front caster enhances cornering by optimizing the tire's contact patch with the road for better grip. This goes along with the general low camber settings you run in Forza most of the time. Decreasing the front caster can be an aggressive way to get a better turn-in reaction in cars that simply don't want to turn, but you also lose speed in turns. Here I'm thinking about cars that act like boats and weird cars like those rear-wheel drive speed builds where it could really help to decrease this value. But normally you have something around 6.5 to 7.0, which we will also use in this case. Anti-roll bars are the go-to setting to tweak your car for mid-corner purposes. The softer the roll bar in Forza Horizon 6, the more grip for your car. But that also means that it turns worse mid-corner, so that you shouldn't always run super soft roll bars for both settings, as your car will suffer from serious understeer. Remember guys, our car features all-wheel drive. We didn't install a wider front tire, but very wide rear tires. Due to that, our car already features understeery tendencies that we want to reduce. That's why you should always start with 165 for all-wheel drive cars, even if it sounds very aggressive. If you notice these settings lead to some oversteer, reduce the rear anti-roll bar or increase the front one to find a sweet spot. The more you bring these values closer to each other, the more understeer your car would become. But for me, 165 feels completely perfect with our car. The spring stiffness controls how the car's weight is transferred in different situations, such as acceleration, braking, or cornering. If your car oversteers out of turns or struggles with traction, you should stiffen your front springs and soften your rear springs. If it understeers, you do the opposite. And for your information guys, your default spring settings should always align with the weight distribution of your car. Our car features more weight at the back, hence your rear springs should be higher than your front springs. You can find this info in the garage menu. Here you see it says 45% front. And overall, comparatively soft settings are the way to go. We're going with 64.9 and 122. And be aware, this looks harder in our case than it actually is, because don't forget we're using the off-road chassis, which is very soft from the get-go compared to others. The ride height determines the center of gravity of your car. We are using the highest front value here for the best possible response when turning in, and with a comparatively low value at the back we exchange some of our stability for a bit more top speed and slightly better rotation. But this doesn't work with every car, because not all cars feature the stability and downforce needed for that. The dampers are actually closely connected to the function of your car's springs. In short, bump damping offers resistance to compression of the spring, where rebound damping offers resistance to extension of the spring. You don't understand that? Don't worry, me neither. Eventually it's trial and error again. As always, it's about the balance you're using, and simultaneously what I also shared regarding the springs, it's also connected to the general weight distribution of your car. Generally speaking, you always want to try to end up somewhere in the middle for your rebound value and pretty low when it comes to bump values. Let's start with the rebound, which is at 8.4 and 11.0, which definitely fits to the weight distribution and the spring settings before. In case of the bump settings, we increased them to 3.3 and 4.7, because the higher rear bump gives us some more initial rotation. Simultaneously, the car is a bit more stable while accelerating. Our settings definitely lead to a nice performance in low speed corners while still maintaining enough speed through mid and high speed turns. Also, another small side fact. Before you try extreme settings in regard to damping to counter a few driving characteristics, tweak your springs first. Fortunately, with the aero settings we're reaching a part which isn't that complicated compared to the stuff we talked about before. In most cases in these higher classes all-round cars you definitely want to go with maximum downforce at the front to reach the highest possible corner speed in high-speed turns. And it's no different this time. The rear wing needs to be adjusted accordingly to reach maximum stability. If it's too low, you'll have oversteer. If it's too high, you'll have understeer. There are still a few cases where you can completely decrease the rear aero, but I would be cautious with that. And if you add too much rear downforce, you'll get unnecessary understeer and drag, means less top speed. Since our Huracan is a grippy boy, we went with a comparatively low number of 115 at the back. Side note, and also mentioned before, the gearing is optimized accordingly to our aero settings. Our car features race brakes, hence we have the ability to adjust them. If you shift your value to the left, the car will get more active when you brake. This will make trail braking easier, but since Horizon 6 made this more tricky in my opinion, I'd rather be conservative here and stick to 48 or 49%. It will still help us to get some more rotation, but it's still stable enough. If you want it even more stable, you go the other way around. But again, this also depends on the car. We, for example, tested an Aventador where we could go all the way to 40% and it still wasn't too aggressive. So again, trial and error, friends. In terms of brake pressure, it's all about personal preference. There's no right and wrong. Well, don't go too low obviously, or your car won't brake anymore. And if your brakes are still able to lock up, it's high enough. The differential allows the tires to rotate at different rates. So let's start with the acceleration settings. The higher you put this, the more aggressive your car will react on the throttle out of turns. For the highest possible momentum, you should always try to fully max this value for all-round and handling heavy cars such as our Huracan. Means going with 100. This, by the way, also applies to rear-wheel drive cars. If this is too aggressive for you, decrease this value slightly, but always stick between 80 and 100. But honestly, in 90% of the all-round all-wheel drive car cases, you want to go with 100% acceleration for both front and rear. And regarding the deceleration, it's basically the same, just the other way around. The lower this value, the better the car will rotate as soon as you let off the brakes. You should always start at 0 and then make small adjustments, front and rear. In our case, we actually felt some small aggressive behavior when we stepped off the gas and therefore increased the rear deceleration by 5. The center balance determines how much power in percent goes to the front and rear axis. Fun fact, even if you set your center balance to 0 or 100%, the other axis still receives some power in this game. And rule of thumb, for grippy all-wheel drive cars you always want to start at a value of around 80, and then you check how far you can go. For the Huracan, we make it slightly more active and go with 84% because the car can cope with it due to its wide tires. By that, it is already rear heavy by still ensuring we're not losing our grip. This Huracan feels amazing now and will make you win every single race, if you got the skill to pay the bill. And if you can't be bothered making all of those adjustments yourself, simply download my tune. It's uploaded to my creative storefront, guys, and yeah, have fun with the tune. And now definitely don't forget to smash like, subscribe, and let me know in the comment section which other types of cars you want to see in future tuning tutorials. Rear-wheel drive cars, dirt racing, cross-country, whatever guys, let me know. And now definitely check out my other video here that I uploaded together with Dubs, my fellow Forza Horizon 6 content creator, in which we showed you 10 amazing cars of Forza Horizon 6 you definitely have to get. Some of them are pretty OP, some of them are the best in the game, and some of them are simply cool. I'm your favorite German potato, I'll see you next time. Cheers.